Descant, a form of expression in which a fixed melody is accompanied through improvisation, point and counterpoint, leading to a greater awareness, leading to something more, leading to something unique, leading to something that is above the book. I'd like to welcome Bernhard Drax to VWBPE's Above the Book conversation, Will VR Matter in Education? Lessons learned from a Second Life documentarian's 10-year life. Bernhard Drax makes media for all occasion, including work in traditional feature documentary, public broadcasting, virtual reality, and music production. Champion of user-created digital content in VR, he is well known for the award-winning mixed reality documentary series, The Drax Files: World Makers, on YouTube. Bernhard has delivered transmedia concepts for such clients as MIT, the MacArthur Foundation, and was lead developer for the Emmy-nominated PBS project Deep Down the Virtual Mind. From 1999 to 2001, Bernhard worked as news producer and engineer at KPFK Radio, I believe that is.
At
my
KPFK
eyesight,
and KZU, yes.
KZ, my eyesight is not as good as it should be.
No, that's good. That's good. KPFK, this is where it all started.
Cool.
To go downhill. No, I'm just kidding.
To go downhill. Well, in Los Angeles, in 2002 to 2004, Drax served as news director at NPR, member radio station KAZU in Pacific Grove. He was instrumental in transforming the local news operation by producing high-quality local content, as well as training reporters and technical staff. Bernhard wrote the score for the feature documentary Log Into Life, which was released internationally in 2013. He wrote and produced a crossover arrangement of Bizet's. Oh my goodness. How do you pronounce that?
Georges Bizet. It's the Carmen opera, and it's the habanera tune from that opera. So people go Google it and hum it right now.
And you're working currently now on the MeTube, I believe, at the moment.
I don't even know what I'm working on. I'm working on too many things. We're doing a follow-up to MeTube 2. So you guys can Google MeTube, which is kind of a funny short film, really wacky short film. And the next one will be in virtual reality. So what it will be, I have no idea. We're still conceptualizing it. But those are those are bigger projects that involve a lot of people, and they take very long. And I always say in interviews that what keeps me sane is that the relative quick turnaround of the Drax Files. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's very rewarding that I can sort of churn them out fairly quickly because I'm my own boss. I don't have to wait for a whole team, like on a feature film, or the other comparison would be writing a book versus being sort of in daily news or even shorter pieces, investigative journalism that don't take 3 or 4 years. But I digress, and you thank you so much for inviting me, and you're here to ask me questions, and I'm not here to jump ahead of the questions.
No, that something. This is all free flowing. So I mean, This is, I've got a list of discussion topics, but if we decide that there's a rabbit hole that we want to go explore, then we go explore the rabbit hole. I mean, it's completely where we want to take things.
It's fascinating that in the introduction, or actually the title of the session is also sort of the future. I guess I have to talk also about the future based on what I learned, and I just want to say one thing. I regret that episode 44 of the Drax Files is not done, and that is actually about. I'm trying to put together a piece. It's about Istanbul University, and they're using Second Life in many, many different, really exciting ways, and have for years, with thousands of students. And I'm just not done. I wanted to get it done for today, and that's a story that will hopefully live long on the YouTubes and serve as a reference when educators are asked, like, what is this? What can you do with virtual? So that's what I'm working on right now. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool. Well, why don't I start off at the beginning, because we'll go through and we'll hit more and more education stuff as we sort of go through. But I mean, one of the things that I'm fascinated about is what actually got you because I mean, through your experience in the news industry, right? There is, obviously people have had a mindset with regards to, oh my God, you're an avatar, you're a freak. But you've been attracted to this particular space, and I'm wondering what got you motivated to explore virtual worlds, virtual reality, as a vehicle for telling people stories.
Well, I discovered Second Life by sheer accident. A little over 10 years ago, and I come from the music field, and then I veered into the public broadcasting field, and back into music, and back and forth, and a musician friend of mine told me about Second Life, and when I came in, the first thing was like, oh, I could do sort of a band, or we could do a virtual band. But I go like, no, I find this fascinating, and I want to explain it to myself, and that's why I started doing little reportages that I did for radio. And so I discovered machinima because I needed obviously the visual component, and then I applied what I learned in radio and put the visuals to it. But the reason why I'm fascinated and I stuck around, because I asked that question myself: why am I still here? What is so fascinating about it? And it's pure and simple. It is a world that is so free. It really facilitates the creative impulse if you have it, or it reawakens something in people that is really wonderful. I mean, we all know all these negative things that can happen in virtual worlds or in online spaces, but thankfully the tabloid press is full of them every day, so we don't have to dwell on them. And that's also, I said this before, but that's something that really bugged me, because I saw all this wonderful stuff. People, coming together, crossing boundaries, working together on things, rediscovering that they had some creative talents. Maybe they were never told that they had them, and here they were free to explore them. Upcoming Istanbul stories also about people who are shy in the classroom, for example, because of the avatar representation. They're all of a sudden participants. There's tons of these kind of examples that are wonderful, and so that really became the calling to kind of counter program, because as you just said, with news, there's a filter, and there should be a filter. Editors have that function, and that's a good thing if they take their job seriously. Sometimes they don't. But I decided I wanted to be an advocacy journalist, in the sense that I wanted to advocate for creative endeavors, if you pursue it with an economic aspect or not. That's actually secondary. But the first impetus is I go into the space, and I'm going to let the space tell me what I should pursue, because it's so open, and that's just wonderful. And to wrap this up, going forward with virtual reality, of course, you talk to Ebbe, everybody has this Sansar anxiety. We have had several podcasts that were called Sansar anxiety. What is happening next? What's coming? High fidelity is the other big elephant in the room. All these devices, people don't have devices. Some people have, blah, blah, blah. Still, Second Life is doing really well. What's the next step? And I don't know where I stand. It's there's a lot of things that I would like to see happen. I'm not sure if they will happen, because ultimately platforms are delivered by private companies at this point. I want to see the metaverse. I want to see something like Second Life ported into the next phase, and the next phase will involve devices input devices that are way too expensive now, of course, but hopefully get accessible. Oh man, Feenan, see, I'm going all over the place now. You got to jump in here because otherwise I'll just keep going. Because another
No.
aspect, now that I'm thinking about it, because when you're talking about education, and that's another aspect of the Istanbul story that is coming out hopefully next week, is where Tuncer Can, who I profile in the piece, says, virtual reality is exciting, but frankly, it's too expensive. I can't just go and buy 50 Oculus headsets and put the cables down in the computer lab. Second Life is something that is working right now. So this transitional phase is interesting and kind of difficult for practitioners who are in the classroom every day.
Well, yeah. I think it is, because I mean you've hit on you've hit on about 24 things here, but I mean it's just just to look at the aspect of technology and the cost in terms of what's going on here. I mean, here it is, we've had this promise of virtual reality for 10, 15 years now, right? In terms of what we've been promised that this can deliver. We haven't gotten there, and to my standpoint, I feel this is mainly because the tools are not really in place to allow us to leverage this stuff correctly. But now I think there's two things happening with regards to the corporate interest that's happening inside this space. One is everybody's trying to carve out not only a niche for themselves, but they're trying to position themselves in such a way that they can start becoming an aggregator of other services. Like everybody's trying to position themselves to become the next Google or the next Facebook. Yeah. And then the other, so that's problem number one, because I feel that's actually limiting creativity rather than encouraging it. The other aspect that I'm finding is simply that, as you said, the cost of this stuff. I would, like, even for myself, I'm a consultant. I'm not rich, but I'm better off than most. And I can't afford to take a look at all these toys. Yeah. Right. Like you look at Oculus Rift, right? And you compare Rift versus Vive. It doesn't matter. It's still an $800 US expense, right? Yeah. And multiply that 1.5 if you consider importing it into Canada. I mean, it's just stupid. But I mean, it's okay, great. There's all these wonderful toys out there that could really do some interesting things, but they're priced outside of, most normal people's ability to invest in. And considering that the life cycle of these things are still in the order of 1 to 2 years before they are going to end up getting replaced.
I was just going to say, actually, I think also that's accelerating. I'm not an expert. I'm just observing the acceleration. And when you follow the announcements of various devices, it is completely insane how that is accelerated. I was going to say, because it's so important what I completely agree with you, that platforms, and again, I mean, this was also criticized with Second Life. This is a critique that's been going on since the beginning of Second Life. It's owned by a company, and we're just going to play on their playgrounds. Interestingly enough, the passionate Second Life people always complain about Second Life. At the same time, they don't complain about Google or Facebook, which are a lot bigger and actually arguably have a lot more restrictions. So that's problematic. I don't have the magic bullet how to solve this, but I think we totally need to just discuss this also really holistically. What does it mean that we're playing on? These are all private entities that we interact with. This is not a public system. I think last time I was interviewed on that topic, I always talk about my mother being a public school teacher. I was raised in that realm of very strong sort of the public school system being that great equalizer. If it's a well-funded system where people get together and everybody has sort of an equal shot at things. When we throw these two things together and then we have a platform that is privately owned, there's a whole bunch of different problematic scenarios, and then there's a whole bunch of dystopian scenarios that are being talked about in various novels. Of course, then Philip Rosedale, who I once actually addressed this with, he says, yeah, science fiction writers, they all write dystopian stuff because it's dramatic and it sells books. And I go, yeah, Philip, you're right, but sometimes this is like 2 minutes into the future, that stuff, is it not? when So anyway, we don't have to go down that route, but bottom line is, moving forward, we are in a walled garden. The next Sansar is already kind of a walled garden. High Fidelity says they want to be an open garden, but they're themselves walled off from Sansar. If you choose to be in Sansar, let's say, it's I don't know.
Well, I mean, I feel it's one of the challenges. I mean, it's one of the real. To give you an example, I mean, as far as Rockcliffe is concerned, I mean, we've had the folks over at Inworlds, and I know the people over there. I know they're wonderful people, right? But Inworlds is a walled garden in terms of open sim, and they've been trying to get Rockcliffe to create a campus over there, and I've said no multiple times, simply because they are a walled garden, right? And for no other reason than that, right? Yeah. Right. So, I mean, at a certain point, right? I mean, from the Rockcliffe perspective, one of the things that I look at is what is out there that we can leverage, that we can bring the cost down for people to engage with, to play with, to try, to experiment, to research with. And that's all well and good, right? But when you have these systems that are completely closed off and you can't import or export information, there's limits on where your creativity can go. Once you've created something, it's impossible to get it out and share it, right? Unless you buy into like the Apple mindset and it says like, yes, everybody will become an Apple aficionado in terms of the future. It's there needs to be some portability in terms of what's going on here.
Well, people would then argue the portability is already in place, and I haven't listened to the interview that you did with Abby. I just came back from Frankfurt yesterday. Also interesting conversations along the lines of virtual reality with the German public broadcasting system. But people will argue that in Sansar and in High Fidelity, everything is transferable because it's just basically the format that 3D modelers have used is the OBJ format and the FBX format, and then people can create content. They can get it out, and they can get it over here, and they can get it over there. One of the problems is related. When I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you about today, what I really learned is that the people on the front lines in the classroom, if it's elementary, whatever level it is, college or K through 12, whatever, they have a really tough job, and many of them are not expert technologists. They need help. They need assistance. And Second Life provided with its simplicity, obviously the public narrative is different. It's like, oh, Second Life is so difficult. I think that's baloney to a large extent. There are people who can compared to a lot of other things, it's actually quite straightforward. But the fact remains, and it will remain, that an educator who wants to put stuff together quickly for students has limited time and has limited time to learn a completely new system. Now, the promise of HMDs and other devices is such that if you have access to content, you can throw together something if you have the headset. Again, we're here at the headset thing. But what I really learned over the last 10 years in Second Life, and I really don't think that that'll change much, is really this issue of educators essentially have to be teamed up with expert creators, and sometimes they don't have access to that talent. So the problem is twofold. All these educational projects that I was involved with, for example, also Deep Down, what we did for PBS, there was a big budget behind that. We recreated a town in Kentucky, and we told the story of mountaintop removal, and tried to educate the middle schoolers about the environmental impact. We had modelers. We had people who could create a model of this Kentucky town If we wouldn't have those, there was no way we could accurately model that town. Now, uh, uh, where am I going? The problem is that the access. The Second Life gives a lot of access to educators, puts a lot of tools into their hands. But if they want to tell stories, if they want to put scripts together, or if they want to do a sort of a mathematical problem in 3D or whatnot, it's still too complex, and I don't see that changing right now. I can't talk about Sansar because I'm under NDA. I'm in the testing phase. But for example, in High Fidelity, there's the same problem of it has not solved the problem of easy tools to put together a concept. But now let me mention, and this is very interesting. Listeners, Google CoSpaces or go to cospaces.io. You can still listen to us, but go to cospaces.io. CoSpaces is a company here in Munich, Germany, where I currently am physically. And I've never heard of them. Last year, all of a sudden, I see what they do. This is a drag and drop type situation where you on a tablet or on the web can put together a scene out of prefab items. They use Blockly, which is based on Scratch from MIT, that programming language with blocks. You can script items. It's very easy to put together a scene, and then that can be rendered in a Google Cardboard. So there's many, many examples on their website where teachers can put together something. They can even teach programming to a certain extent to the kids via the Blockly programming language, or at least they can do it themselves and then present it to the kids. And it's basically virtual reality because you can deploy it in Google Cardboard, and then of course Samsung Gear VR and the higher end headsets. Now, it's funny because if a Second Lifer looks at that stuff, and I've heard it before and I did it myself, you look at these fairly simplistic models and you go like, oh my God, that looks like Second Life in 2003. The point is not the visual fidelity. The point is the interoperability. Oops, my English is declining.
No, you got it. You got it.
And the ability for teachers who are not technologists to very quickly create materials for their lessons. And I was thoroughly impressed with CoSpaces, a very young company, and they're just getting started, and they're adding features, and it kind of works. So I wish that somebody like Philip Rosedale, who, at least when you hear him talk, is very passionate about this cause. But then when I go into High Fidelity, this is a complicated matter because there's always the other priorities, and they have VC money and stuff like that. But right now, the interface in High Fidelity is convoluted and complex. And again, like I started this point, and I will now finish it. The evolution of virtual worlds, in my mind, is not emphasizing access and simplicity and access, basically. It's not enough emphasized. Right now, everybody goes like, oh, we got to be super compatible with HMDs because that's how we got to get the kids in, because they're going to go out and buy a new computer for $3,000 and an HMD for $1,000. Yeah, they got that money lying around, and we got to please them. I mean, I'm joking. That's kind of how it comes across a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my own little soapbox every now and then, and one of the things I've always, as if nobody could tell, right?
Feenan, that was very subtle thing of be like, Draxter, it's time to get down from that soapbox.
No. Actually, I actually like the soapbox. It's a nice soapbox. Okay, I like the soapbox, but I mean, one of the things that I've consistently said, and I don't think people at the lab or any place else actually believe me. The notwithstanding the social environment that was competitive and what have you, and things that we had very early on, the true competitiveness I always felt of the Second Life environment was the fact that they took very what at the time were, and even still today, right, were very complicated tools, very complicated technologies. And they brought them together with very simple user interfaces, and they made a series of tools available. It wasn't about the fact that we could build in here. It wasn't the fact that we could have conversations in here. It wasn't the fact that we could do voice in here. And you know, dozens of other things, right? It's the fact that you could do all of them in here and make them work seamlessly together. If you go back, you know, a couple of decades prior, right, you take a look at, you know, how did Microsoft become the relative giant that it became, right? Especially considering that it was head-to-head with Apple at the time. And one of the things that they did was they made things interoperate with each other, right? Word talked to Excel, talked to PowerPoint, talked to Access, everything talked with the operating system. Nobody else was doing that, right? IBM didn't get it. Their products, they had all the same products, but the products wouldn't talk to one another. You come into Second Life, everything talks to one another, right? And that's, I don't think they've ever gotten it, right? Is that the true competitiveness of what it is that they're doing is not the fact that they're introducing all these little cute eye candy type things. It's not the fact that we could do Oculus Rift. It's, can you do Oculus Rift and be able to type and build things in the virtual world at the same time, right?
Yes.
And you can't really do that.
Well, you can, and again, I mean, we're in such a transitional phase right now. So you're making very good points. So theoretically, and again, I just want to say for the record that what I've seen in Sansar is really promising, and I also trust. I don't know. People go like, "Hey, Drax, you got to check your head. You're trusting Linden Lab with a new venture." You know, some cynics say that is crazy. No, I do trust them. I do trust the current bunch of decision makers to be completely aware of what people want and need. Now, you can work. It's actually quiet. That's actually something that is pretty cool, is when you are in a HMD and in high fidelity that already works. You can take things with your controllers, you can put them together, you can stack them on top of each other, you can throw them around, and you can give them to other people. So this stuff is pretty compelling. There's another level of immersion with this hardware. It can't be denied. I personally think, though, and I said this, I just came back from Frankfurt, where there was a VR exhibit from German public broadcaster ZDF. They're investing a lot of money into virtual reality, interestingly enough, which I was completely unaware of. And they're very young people, and they're all about immersion. And I felt old because I said, I feel immersed and I don't need an HMD. The HMD is cool, but kind of makes me nauseous after a while. And I feel very immersed with my community in Second Life when I go in, or, you know, or I work on something, or we film something, or we build a set and then we film it with people. I'm totally there. The HMD adds very little to that type of immersion. And a lot of other people say the same thing. Now, I do think, and maybe I'm totally going off a tangent here, possibly, but I do think that there is quite a negative possibility here, is that we need those two TV screens or computer monitors kind of glued to our head, because otherwise we have lost the ability to imagine and immerse ourselves. And so in that sense, I'm actually kind of a pessimist in regards to where the train is headed. You know, that we kind of need that constant stimulation in order to feel anything anymore. People have actually criticized Second Life because of that. They go like, oh, why don't you go out and smell one flower instead of looking at a million copied flowers that are not even real? Um, and now I find myself in the position where I go like, hey, why don't you just look at a beautifully modeled flower on the desktop, and can you even appreciate that, or do you need like these two TV screens glued into your eyes like a Clockwork Orange, you know, that type of thing? But I'm now back on the dystopian angle. I don't know. In terms of education, when you were talking, I remember a piece that we worked on called Always in Season, which is a documentary film about the lynching of African Americans in the United States. The film is not yet completed. Danny Glover is narrating the film. It's a wonderful thing. If you Google it, you'll find some of the stuff we did on it. We started in 2009. It's incredibly hard to get funding for documentaries, so that's the reason why it's not completely finished. But we used Second Life for it, and I remember that was done by the Bay Area Video Coalition, which was funded by the MacArthur Foundation. People at the time said, oh, you can't use Second Life for that. And I said, why? And the answer was because you cannot control access, and there's going to be griefers, and there's going to be people who are going to, this is going to be terrible. This is a really tough subject matter, and you don't want people who think that's funny and kind of troll around and stuff like that. So this is another aspect. I know I'm completely changing the subject, but this is another aspect that is not resolved in my mind when it comes to open virtual worlds. Now, one thing that Lynn and I will probably say, yes, we have it resolved because we allow you to control access, and as a matter of fact, in Second Life, the access is controlled. Where we are right now, people can't come in. So if you own it, you have agency over it. So it's a private area. Serena's asking what's the name of the film. The name of the film is Always in Season, so you can look that up. Yeah, that's just another aspect of online interaction. But if I would go further in sort of talking about what the problem is, and then we're actually back in education, because it's the problem of controlling the classroom, which is also tough in the real world, depending on the level of motivation that people have in your classroom. So yeah, jump in, Feenan. Yeah.
No. Well, I mean, it's an interesting point, and I think when you're talking about this dystopian future, I don't, the problem with the slippery slope argument is sometimes the slippery slope is the correct argument to be making.
Yeah.
But notwithstanding, I mean, we have, again, I think people sort of miss the mark on some of these particular things. I mean, right now, Second Life, to a certain extent, everything that happens in here is reviewed by a huge team of lawyers, right? In terms of where is Linden Lab potentially going to get themselves into a problem being sued, which is part of the reason why you can't have a proper experience in here, because a lot of things that we take for granted in real life, in the real world, such as having a class show up to a classroom, right, is you can't take for granted that the same patterns of behavior will exist inside a virtual world. And so the answer to that, according to the way all these worlds have been developed, is to basically say, okay, well, we'll make it so restrictive such that you can't actually create the experience that you're trying to create in the first place. Yeah. Right? So here it is. You've got a school, you've got a classroom inside a school, you've got students that attend to that particular class. I mean, in a real life university, you're not worried about griefers, right? I mean, it's the chances that somebody's going to come randomly wandering into the classroom, yep, right, is between slim and none. And yet, as soon as we get here, right, we're not given the tools in order to sort of manage that situation.
That's a good point. Well, you're talking about college also too. When I talk about education, I always throw in sort of primary school or middle school, where there's a fair amount of chaos in the classroom, and the level of motivation is very different, and you have because I mean, in college, ideally there are people who are already sort of self-motivated, and the reason why they show up is because they want to learn something. And in middle school, the kids are forced to be in the classroom. That's one part. But you're going back right now to this very important topic of that we're basically playing in a private playground. We're basically putting a classroom into a mall, and the property is owned by the mall operator.
Well, sort of. But I mean, let me extend that analogy a little bit further. I mean, it's one thing to basically say, okay, this is my mall, I own the mall, I control the rules, right? But every single other mall owner that's out there is all playing by the same set of rules, which are not the rules that we would normally have in real life, right? So again, let me go back to the classroom analogy for a moment. When students walk into a classroom, there is an implicit authorization to the teacher that the students are going to behave in a particular way, that they're going to accept certain particular types of input, right? A teacher can put whatever they want on the board. The student has accepted by the virtue of the fact that they've crossed that threshold into the classroom, right? That they are going to view the material that the teacher puts up there. You don't have each student, right? And God forbid this should happen inside grade 9, but you don't have each student basically saying, oh, the teacher's written something on the board, I'm going to selectively either accept or deny whatever it is that the teacher's put on the board, right? You by virtue of the fact that you want to be there, you've given up some of those rights to say, no, I'm not going to accept that input, right? But in these environments, right, it's those rights have to, according to the lawyers, those rights have to be a function, permission. I can't find the right word here, but they're inherent as part of the user. The user can selectively accept or deny whether or not you're going to show them a YouTube video. Every single other mall owner that's out there, every single other virtual world is playing by the same set of legal and conceptual rules in terms of how the virtual space should be set up. Nobody's gone beyond that to basically say, hey, wait a second, that's not the experience that people have when they're going out to a mall, or they're going to a movie, or they're going to a whatever else, right? And so they're private organizations, but they're all playing by the same set of rules. Nobody's thinking beyond the box.
Yeah, that's a problem of capitalism, and in my mind. But I'm turning into this communist in my advanced age now. I also realize, because it's, I realize, like, I bring up these dystopian scenarios and I realize I'm actually early. I get up early, and I realize when I'm up early, I'm extremely positive, and then the day, it's not that the day wears me down. And I know you guys don't want to hear how Draxter lives his day. He gets up cheerful, has all these ideas, and at the end of the day it's like, oh my god, we're going to hell, please, where's my hand basket, can you give me one? No, but since it is very late where I'm right now, I realize that my thoughts on this subject, they do really circle around some of the more dystopian issues when it comes to education, and Feenan, you're making such good points. I think the bigger problem, really, I think, if you would like to have a virtual environment where the teacher has a certain amount of control, that is technologically possible, and I don't think that is a big problem to implement that. And I would actually say that if you imagine a classroom where everybody has an HMD, it's actually easier to control that the student is. You can force the student to be engaged because you can control their gaze much more. We already have headsets where the eye is tracked, where the eye is looking. I mean, this is really straight out of the Ready Player One novel, where there are certain scenes where the students kind of drift off, and the HMD can detect that if the student is attentive. Now that might be sort of a great scenario for the teacher, so he has sort of very accurate feedback about the engagement of the student. I find this incredibly dystopian because, again, I mean, I'm an idealist in the sense that I want us to change. And when you're talking about thinking outside the box, I think we all need to think outside this big box of motivation. Where does motivation come from? And we have to fundamentally change the structure, how we tend to engage kids. Now, I actually find this in Germany worse than in America, but I also think it's maybe a middle-class thing. Again, I mean, I'm talking about kids because my son is 13, and primarily the motivation in Germany seems to me out of fear. I mean, I'm not telling you guys anything new, but the fear comes not so much from the schools, it comes from the parents who are themselves afraid of sort of falling down the economic ladder, and they basically say to their kids, God, you got to really totally pay attention, or we're gonna, you're gonna be homeless in the future. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's essentially the way the game is played, and that's not a good thing. I'm really worried that with using virtual reality in the future, using technology, and not really using technology to unleash the creativity and that sort of impetus to also collaborate across sort of cultural borders, even if you will, but merely use the technological capabilities of a virtual world and an HMD to control people, to control the students. That is pretty scary because it will get a lot easier to control people.
Well, actually, it was interesting because as you're talking about it, the first thing and I'm glad you sort of mentioned this idea about critical thinking and creativity.
Yes.
Because, here's the thing that I'm thinking of, right? I mean, and I can, case study from business, right? It's, as part of my consulting work, every so often you get a boss or somebody that comes along that basically says, if you're not here from 9 to 5, if your ass is not in that chair, right? If I can't walk outside my office and see you there, even if you're playing solitaire for 8 hours a day, you're not working.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet the reality of the situation, right, is that quite often the most creative work that we do is not sitting in a cube farm in front of a glowing radiation device with being afraid to talk above a whisper for fearing of cheesing everybody off around you. If we have technology, that the whole focus of the technology is to identify whether or not somebody has their ass planted in a chair in front of a computer, right?
Yep.
Somehow we're equating that is learning as opposed to what's happening between the ears.
That is really problematic. And you know what? And here's the connection also. And we all witnessed, this wonderful when the Second Life hype was going on. Everybody talked about, oh my God, telecommuting. The possibilities are endless. And then remember when I think Yahoo they brought all their telecommuters back and said no, you got to be back in the chair, because it was sort of a resurgence of sort of those type of managers who equate that kind of, even if it's a zombie playing solitaire, it's still sort of like somebody's breathing and he's in front of me and I can see him, so he's got, it's all good. So but this is a systemic issue. If we would completely change the system and basically say, the measurable, how I measure that you are productive, or how I measure that you're successful in what you're tasked to do, we got to measure that stuff much differently than we currently do. And I am actually really, it's good that you bring this up. That's one aspect that really depresses me, that there was this little glimmer of hope where I remember all these articles. There was an article about a woman who for IBM, and IBM was enthusiastic about Second Life as well as one tool. But I remember an article that had nothing to do with Second Life about a woman who was very high up in the IBM ladder and worked from home and was able to go to take care of the kids if there was something, and all these wonderful things. And there's a complete backlash, with the exception, of course, of the sort of super high privileged people working at Google, let's say, or people who but not the normal person, because essentially it goes back to the normal person can't be trusted, because the normal person will not get their ass out of bed in the morning if I don't threaten him to fire him constantly. If I don't stand behind his back and look over his shoulder.
Yeah, listen. Unfortunately, I think you and I could probably talk for hours at this point, because there's just so many different things that. Oh God, yes, yeah, for sure, absolutely. Yes. I would love to do that. But listen, let me throw one more question at you, and then we got to wrap up because we've got another event happening right after this. In the last 10 years, if you had to pick one area which one primary lesson learned that you feel educators should really take away from the last 10 years, what do you feel it would be?
Okay. From virtual worlds, educators need to do two things. It's along the lines of what we talked about. Educators need to trust their students more. They need to trust that they will collaborate and that they will be self-motivated, and if you give them freedom and relinquish control, there will be amazing things will be happening. And that's, I think, a really tough thing for most teachers to do, because they're trained to part of their training is probably happens in the military academy. Drill and control, and again, I'm talking like I implement this in my own world. Sometimes I can. Sometimes I have to, especially with the kids in middle school. Again, my son, sometimes I need to kind of rein it in a little bit and control it a little bit more. But then I remind myself, this is actually something that I preach all the time with my contribution to documenting Second Life in education. This is a really, really important part. And the other part is for the teachers to embrace, it's actually very related. The teachers need to embrace the chaos. There's a German word, and I'm going to be very, very fast on this. There's a German word called Situationsansatz. I don't know how to translate it, but basically that's a concept that was, I think, started in the 70s, when a teacher has a lesson plan for Monday, and he comes in the classroom, and he has a lesson plan, and he has to get through this lesson plan. The teacher needs to be prepared to feel the mood of the class, and if need be, if the class is somewhere else, the teacher needs to pick up what the class gives him, and then kind of it's the teacher's duty to go with what the class's state of mind is, and then try to bring the lesson plan or what he has to kind of mold it and fit it into what the class has sort of prepared the ground for them. It's like an earth, and he has to plant the seeds in there, but he has different seeds. I don't know if I explained this right, but I think a virtual world is really perfect for this kind of approach, because we can mold it. We can mold it in the moment. And if a teacher allows for that, if a teacher is confident enough in his or her ability to then lead in this sort of creative way, then there's nothing better than a virtual world. There's nothing better. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, listen, Drax, I want to thank you very much. This has been an incredible, the time's just flown by, and, like I said, we could probably talk for hours on all of this stuff, because there's so many things that we just haven't gotten to that I would love to have a conversation on. But I do want to thank you for being with us here at this year's 10th anniversary conference with us. I know we've been trying to get together on these things for a couple of years now, and it's sort of like, yay, we finally get to have Drax on board.
No, Feenan, but now we will have you on the podcast as well, and we expand on that topic. Then we can go a little bit over time, and maybe we'll bring in another person, and we'll talk about this. Because again, let me just say two things really quickly. When we touched on this sort of backlash from telecommuting, then to kind of back to total old school sort of managers sort of standing behind you, breathing down your neck constantly. This is this push and pull all the time, and and it's really frustrating. We could be completely somewhere else in a positive way with all this technology if we would just I don't know. It's really frustrating actually, but that means we just have to keep pushing. We just have to calmly sort of sell that wonderful aspect that we have to offer.
Yeah, embrace the chaos.
Yeah, Buffy Beale, embrace the. That's not what I said. You put words in my mouth.
No, that's exactly what you said. I've got it written down right in front of me. That's exactly what you said.
Oh crap!
I think we're going to create a journal called that now. We're going to call it the Embrace the Chaos Journal.
When I'm going to do Latin with my son tomorrow, and I'm going to have him down, he says, "Dad, you yesterday in this discussion, Dad, you said embrace the chaos. So I'm gonna go outside with my skateboard, running over the Latin books. Hey, I got a creative idea. I'm going to put the Latin books in front of me, and then I drive with my skateboard over them. No,
there you go. Well, Drax, thank you very much. I got to let Mal go because he's got another session he's got to get to. But again, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk soon.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.